Here we have the, wait, what do I have? I don't even know what monitor this is. Here we have the ASUS, ASUS ROG Strix XG27AQM, a 270Hz 1440p IPS gaming monitor with pretty much everything you could ask for. But how does it compare to the competition? Well, really good actually. Let's start with the pixel response times. The XG27AQM has a total of 6 overdrive levels ranging from 0 to 5, with the sweet spot being 3. Now I know you might be thinking, but doesn't 4 look better? Technically yes, and you could keep it at the 4 setting all the time if you're going to be running games always at around 240 FPS. But if you're going to be dipping down to 144 or a little bit lower FPS, you're going to want to stick to the 3 setting because that's going to be the setting that doesn't introduce any overshoot unless you go really low, like 60 Hz. Now in terms of how it stacks up to the competition, this is what it's like comparing it to the Acer Predator XB273UGX and the Alienware AW272-1D. They all look pretty much the same, with the exception of the Acer and the ASUS having black frame insertion, whereas the Alienware doesn't. Now that's not to say that the Alienware is at a disadvantage, because the Acer has a maximum brightness of about 130 nits with black frame insertion enabled, and the ASUS is about 160 nits, so it's pretty dark, and most people won't probably end up using it anyways, because a lot of people get headaches from using black frame insertion, but it is worth noting. One thing that's really special about this ASUS's black frame insertion though is that it's BFI sync or eLMB sync, meaning that you can use the black frame insertion while enabling G-Sync compatibility at the same time. Now, how these pixel response times translates when it comes to gaming, I'd say they're pretty good. As you saw, the normal overdrive without black frame insertion is pretty good. It's not like the clearest in the world, but it doesn't really have trailing or ghosting. Now the same could be said for the other monitors, but really the focus is on the ASUS here. Regardless, the gaming experience is very good. I was actually going to review the Scepter C27 before this, but I told Scepter, listen, this thing is hot garbage because there's so much trailing that I could barely even use it in games. I couldn't do anything. I was just feeling like a bronze player in Valorant or silver or whatever the lowest rank is. So going from that to this was a huge step up because everything was just so much more clear, even without black frame insertion. Input lag is also extremely good, up there with the best of the best. So if you're worried about like, am I going to be able to hit my shots when it comes to a flick or swapping from one enemy to another during a spray pattern, you're not going to have any issues with that at all. It's super good. The black equalizer, on the other hand, is not as good, but it's not bad. It's not the darkest I've ever seen, but it's definitely nowhere near being the brightest. I'd give this an average or above average in terms of brightening up the scene. It does have a very good color saturation feature though. It gets very saturated. Now, when it comes to media consumption, content creation, and all that, it also does very good. You noticing a pattern here? It's doing pretty good in almost everything it touches. Media consumption is very good on this monitor. One thing I like in particular is the panel. It's technically just another fast IPS panel like plenty of the other 240, 1440p, and even 1080p 240Hz monitors, but this one has very nano IPS-like colors, meaning that colors will look pretty saturated compared to many of the other fast IPS panels I've tested and even standard IPS panels. This I feel like is going to create a very nice visual experience for most people because most people do like saturated-ish colors, and this does deliver. In terms of the technical stuff, it covers 100% of the sRGB and Adobe RGB color space and 95% of the DCI-P3 color space. That's pretty wild. That's a lot of color space coverage. So whether you're a photo or video editor, this will have all the color space you need. Now, when it comes to the color accuracy, grayscale, and all that kind of stuff, that's something that I won't be able to fully show you this video because I'm having issues with my Portrait Calman Ultimate software. Future me interrupting the past me, I managed to get Calman Ultimate working without the help of Calman support because they haven't responded in 5 days, so I'll be able to go over all the information you need. Starting with the color accuracy, this is how it performs out of the box. This result is good for media consumption, but far from good for color work. I'm talking intermediate or expert level color work. There is an sRGB profile which makes the colors a little more accurate and does clamp the color gamut, but this is still not good for expert level color work, only basic editing. The same applies when it comes to the grayscale performance, meaning that it's good for media consumption, but it's not good for color work since the color temperature is way too cool even if you use the sRGB profile, which barely does anything to correct this issue. Calibrating the display yields perfect results, giving an average color checker delta E of 0.46 for the sRGB color space and 0.59 for the DCI-P3 color space. Now, I really don't recommend using the sRGB color space unless you really need to. I would recommend using the DCI-P3 color space because that has a much wider gamut. The colors look nicer, they look more saturated, with the only issues really being the pure reds, pure greens, and pure yellows, which have a max delta E of about 4. This won't really be an issue since most colors you're working with won't be those pure 3 colors, but it is worth noting. Grayscale performance was also perfected, having an average delta E of 0.8 with the color temperature being where it should be, 6500-ish Kelvin, and the gamma curve issues have been perfected. None of this crazy wild roller coaster looking chart. The monitor gets pretty bright, having a maximum peak brightness of about 451 nits when calibrated, and the contrast ratio is okay, standard for this kind of monitor. It's not the worst on its list, but it's not the best. Really, the difference between this and something like the Samsung Odyssey G7 is a little bit noticeable, but the G7 isn't really that much better either. Really, we just need OLED monitors without burn-in or mini LEDs to become more mainstream. That's what I really want. Backlight bleed and IPS glow weren't noticeable or any issues on my unit, but uniformity was a whole different story. On the 30% grays, this is probably one of the worst performances I've seen, but it really wasn't that bad or noticeable. It really was an issue when it came to 100% whites or peak whites, with the left and right corner of the screen having really noticeably dark tints to them. Now, to be clear, even though it was noticeable, the user experience wasn't really hindered. I didn't really notice it that much. It mostly was just blocked out when I was using the monitor normally, because most of the time I'm going to be seeing a lot of the things in the middle of the screen. Viewing angles are up there with the best of the best. No matter what angle you're looking from, there's no high contrast effect, no angle discoloration, or even a loss in brightness when looking off axis at about 178 degrees. It's crazy how OLED-like these LCD panels are in terms of viewing angles. Lastly, we have the design and the OSD. We're going to start with the OSD. It has 4 buttons on the back of the monitor with a navigation nipple, but I wouldn't really recommend using it because, well, 1, there's a software you can download to control the OSD through Windows, and it has pretty much everything you need. And 2, the buttons on the back of the monitor feel so crappy, flimsy, cheap, you name it. It's the worst button I've ever touched in my entire life. It's that bad. So anyways, the software lets you control the brightness, contrast, blue light filter, shadow boost, ASCR, which is your dynamic contrast ratio, which I would just recommend leaving off, your color temperature, saturation, and gamma. Then if you click the Game Plus tab, you can adjust things like your crosshair, a timer, an FPS counter, and even position them wherever you want. Then AppSync lets you tie certain profiles that you made for specific games. So when you open up a particular game, you can have that profile activate automatically without you having to do anything yourself. Then there's multi-frame, which lets you rearrange windows wherever you want them to in a specific order. Then hotkeys to basically just set hotkeys. Then system, which has the rest of the OSD's functions like transparency and some other things you can turn on and off at your leisure. Overall, it's very robust, easy to use, and is easily one of the best software OSDs I've ever used. I'd say it's up there with MSI's Gaming OSD 2.0. I'd say they're neck and neck, so these are the best software OSDs that you can get. In terms of the design, it's your standard ASUS ROG design. Nothing's really changed here. One thing I really don't like are these legs. Any long-term viewer of this channel knows that I hate legs because they just take up so much desk space, which is why I have a monitor arm. And these are no exception, taking up an extremely large amount of desk space. They do look good though. They're also pretty high quality, being made of metal and having some plastic trim in the cylindrical part of the base. The stand has a built-in wire routing hole, so you won't have cables just dangling all around your desk. These will be routed nicely. The RGB on the back right of the monitor is pretty dark. It doesn't really do much except just shine barely. And the design overall is pretty gamery. Your standard ROG Strix design like pretty much every ROG Strix product available. In terms of the front, it's got your standard small bezels and slightly thicker chin. Nothing unusual here, but just standard. In terms of adjustability, it's got tilt, height, swivel, and pivots. It's got 100 by 100 VESA mounting support. And for I/O, it's got one DisplayPort 1.4 port, 2 HDMI 2.0 ports, a headphone jack, and 2 USB 3.0 ports. So that's everything you need to know. With that said, should you get this, and should you get this over the other 1440p 240Hz competitors? Yeah, I'd say so. Given that all of these are around the same price at $700, including this one, then I'd say this one's probably the one to get, being that it has a black equalizer that's probably one of the better ones in its class and has a great color saturation feature. It's got good black frame insertion with probably one of the higher brightnesses, even though it's still pretty low. The response times are all pretty much the same between all these kinds of monitors. The input lag is also extremely good. It's got a software OSD, which most of the other ones don't even have, and even if it did, it doesn't have most of the functions built into it. And it's got pretty much the most of everything, doing all of it well. So I'd say, yeah, this is probably the one to get. And yes, that's even comparing it to the G7, the AW2721D, the XB273UGX, you name it. I've tested pretty much most except for the RS-KD27X, whatever it is. But other than that, I'm not really sure RS has the best OSD stuff because I've seen what their other monitors did, but again, I can't speak for that monitor. Anyways, this one's a really good one. It's got everything you need, doing everything well, no compromises, kind of like a jack of all trades, master of pretty much all of them kind of thing. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed the video, leave a like. If you disliked it, leave a dislike. You're still helping the channel because you're giving interaction. Comment some stuff down below because YouTube likes that. Consider subscribing to my channel and supporting me via Patreon because I like money. The Discord server is now open to everybody. So if you want to join my Discord server, I'll leave a link somewhere in the pinned comments or in the description. Follow me on Twitch, watch me play some games. And yeah, that's it. Have a great day every day. Peace.